As Colin mentioned, I'm standing in today for my fellow Bright Flagger, Kevin Cohn, who is unfortunately unwell, and we hope Kevin feels better soon and is getting some rest. As Colin mentioned, on today's webinar, we're going to be discussing hiring and being hired in legal ops. As everyone's aware, we're 1 year into the Great Resignation and 2 years into the COVID pandemic, and the market for talented legal ops professionals is red hot. In this webinar, I'm incredibly excited to be joined by a remarkably experienced panel of hiring managers to discuss what they look for in legal ops candidates and to share their secrets to attracting, developing, and retaining top talent. They're also going to provide insights into their personal journeys and how their own career planning has been shaped by the events of the last 2 years. As Colin mentioned, I'm delighted to be joined on the panel by Anna Richards, Senior Manager of Legal Operations at Zendesk, Zach Rosenblatt, Legal Operations Senior Manager at the Kraft Heinz Company, and Akshay Verma, Director and Head of Legal Operations at Coinbase. Anna, I might turn to you first of all. Each of you is hiring for or has recently filled a legal ops role. What is it you're looking for when making a legal ops hire, and why?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me, Alex. So great to be here. I'm excited to speak with my fellow panelists. The way that I think about building my team really kind of tracks back to as we're thinking about goal setting at the beginning of the year. I generally do a annual health checkup of our operations team against, I typically use the clock core competencies, and do an analysis of maturity for our current team, saying, how are we doing in each of these areas? Where might there be something that corresponds with the goals for the team? How can I think about, the competency opportunities versus our functional opportunities, and where do we want to try and move the needle? I'll then map my team against, who's doing what? Do we have a progression plan in place for folks who are here? And where do we continue to see gaps? Where is information not being, kind of exchanged as it should be? Or where are we missing some sort of support for the department? Or as additional goals for legal are coming to light, where is there new spots that we need to plug in and kind of fill in gaps? So, using that structure and framework, it gets pretty easy to lay out, this is my team. This is where we're kind of playing. This is where I see us progressing in the next year based on goals I've set with my direct reports. This is a place that we have an opportunity. And hey, GC, in order to get us to where you want to go, this is where I think that we need to plug in some talent. I'll then map some competencies and skill sets to that, and generally make a pretty decent business case for myself in order to get some roles filled.
And Akshay, you've recently joined Coinbase to lead legal operations. How are you thinking about this? What are the types of roles you're looking to fill at the moment, and why?
Yeah, I'll echo a +1 to everything that Anna said, and add a couple of different things. A lot of what legal operations as a function needs to do requires buy-in, and I don't care what company you're at. I don't care the size or the maturity of the department. I don't care who hired you or who you report to as the head of legal operations. You're going to need to get buy-in for the things that you're advocating for. And the most difficult part of that conversation is that you want to do things that are actually in the best interests of the people that you need to get buy-in from. So that's a huge skill set that I look for in the people that I hire across all levels. Like, do you have the aptitude or the experience actually doing that? But in terms of kind of thinking through the team and how to build it out, it's really looking across the department around what the gaps are. One of the biggest themes that I've worked at Facebook under and I'm bringing to Coinbase is how are we freeing up space for the department? So for the lawyers and legal professionals to focus on their core strategic work. As we know, legal operations is about efficiency and about creating efficiency. And legal departments, from my perspective, hopefully this is non-controversial, they're at their best when the lawyers and the legal professionals are focused on the highest value, highest risk work. So the things that pull them away from that are the things that we need to create space for from a legal operations perspective. So folks who have experience doing that, the aptitude doing that, but then certainly thinking through what the structure of the team should be, I work backwards from those aspects of the department.
And there's so much there in what Anna and actually I've already touched on, Zach. From your perspective, legal ops obviously covers such a broad range of responsibilities, from implementing technology solutions right up to the kind of strategic planning and OKR setting. How do you think about carving up responsibilities across different legal ops roles within your team?
Yeah, I really like that Anna and Akshay both mentioned figuring out where we want to be and then trying to highlight gaps. And I think that goes into career planning as well as filling roles, is trying to figure out what experiences your people are trying to get and then trying to match that up with the needs of the business.
And Anna, from your perspective, and when you think about kind of carving up responsibilities across your legal operations team, are you aligning team members to technology solutions, or how do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a fingerprint based on where you are, right? You can do it so many different ways, which is really exciting, especially as a leader in this space. There are some places that I think generally people fall into. You have some functions around like e-billing and outside counsel management and perhaps project management and some other things. Something that we did this last year, the last hire that I made, was a really exciting kind of very commercial aligned role, because we have most of our business in the department happening through our commercial and transactional attorneys. And so rather than trying to stick it to some sort of like process or technology base, it was really this functional support. So that was something that I hadn't seen done, but had talked with my team about. I recognized the need, and it seemed like the right place to come from it was from the operations side of things. So it's going to be different depending on where you are. And again, like to echo Akshay and Zach, the buy-in that you can get and the cases that you can make, but it's working well. My commercial attorneys seem very happy, and I feel very in the know with our biggest engine that's driving the department these days.
That's really interesting, Anna. From your perspective, Akshay, from your prior experience at Facebook or your plans at Coinbase, have you got a preference as to how you align your team, whether kind of partnering with business units or aligning them with individual pieces of technology that the team are using?
Yeah, I think of it kind of in two buckets. One, to Anna's point, there are foundational plumbing that every department needs, regardless of industry or size and so forth. The earlier you can install that foundational plumbing, like the better off you're going to be for all kinds of blowups down the road. And then on top of that, there are some unique aspects to departments. And Anna just mentioned, her department, her company, very commercial agreement driven, right? Coming from Facebook, that wasn't a huge pain point for us. The vast majority of the revenue from Facebook came through online click-through agreements that advertisers. So it wasn't a revenue generating aspect of the company that required like heavy commercial support. Product development, right? Especially at technology companies, certainly true at Facebook, equally true at Coinbase, is a huge portion of how the business functions. So understanding that ecosystem within the department and within the company is critical to figuring out how the legal operations team can support that function. That's something that I'm starting to uncover now at Coinbase, and we'll figure out what the right support structure is. So there is that kind of unique company-specific angle to the legal operations team that I think can be really, really powerful.
That's really interesting. And a regular debate we have here at Bright Flag when we're recruiting for roles is whether you should optimize for experience or potential. From your perspective, Zach, would you have a kind of a strong preference between optimizing for a candidate's experience or in particular, obviously, legal ops experience, or would you focus more on the potential and transferable skills that you identify?
Yeah, personally, in the roles I've filled, I'm looking a lot more for potential and how we can grow those people within the team. I think that where we want some expertise in a very specific area, we're probably going to look at a consulting opportunity more than bringing someone on full-time to the team. So I lean highly toward the potential part there.
That's interesting. And certainly, Anna, from my experience speaking with legal ops leaders on our podcast, it certainly seems like there's obviously such an array of backgrounds that people working in legal operations have come from and different skill sets they bring to the table. And it is still such a new space. There's obviously a really compelling argument, as Zach says, for kind of focusing on potential. From your perspective, do you kind of optimize for legal ops experience, or are you looking at other things and assessing candidates?
Well, it's interesting to your point, the industry itself is still fairly new. I think it is becoming a bit more established. So it'll be interesting to see what the arc of that journey is as far as what folks are looking for as they hire. I think it depends a little bit on the role type too, right?
Mhm.
So if you're hiring a more junior role, having openness to, other industries where there seems to be this kind of crossover of skill set, that kind of potential focus, like you said, and knowing that people probably haven't grown up in this world very much is definitely something to keep in mind. If it's a first legal ops hire and you're looking for somebody to stand up a department, or you have a very specific need that you have to have somebody to come in and fill right away, the actual like skill set and demonstrated success in that is going to become much more important.
Yeah, I think that's so true, Anna, in terms of what is it you're looking to achieve, informing that the balance that you strike between experience and potential. Actually, from your perspective, as you've kind of gone about scaling teams, how do you think about that?
I think to Anna's point, assuming that you have a direction in place, priorities and so forth, and someone who's kind of done that before, I'm a huge fan of potential and aptitude. I think people who show the growth mindset, I think people who are hungry to learn, particularly in the space that I play in, that Coinbase plays in, that Facebook plays in, there are no answers to the things that we need to do, even in the operational space. Like, we've never done this before, or we're not sure what the industry thinks about this, or whatever the industry does actually doesn't fit here. So we got to figure this out for ourselves. Like there's no one who has that experience. So I really, in addition to any substantive experience, which for me become relatively table stakes for candidates, is the ability to think through and ideate on really thorny, complicated issues. And to me, that's more about potential and aptitude and the growth mindset than it is actual experience.
100%. I couldn't agree more in that, and the kind of array of really interesting backgrounds that people in senior legal operations positions have, I think, is testament to that. I was speaking to Jen McCarran at Netflix about how she finds her time working as a musician, and the creativity that she takes from that has impacted her approach to scaling legal ops. Just a great example of that. Obviously, not every company is for every person, and vice versa. I'd be interested, Zach, in how the culture of your organization helps you stand out when you are hiring.
Yeah, Kraft Heinz is a very fast-paced environment, I think, where, we talk about meritocracy a lot, and I think that there's a lot of room, just given the size of the organization, to grow and learn with the company. And I think that it attracts a very specific type of person, right, who wants that fast-paced, get up every day, not really know what you're going to be getting into. When I joined, I was the only legal operations person, right, for a 50,000 person company. That's wild for all of us on the phone to think about. But I think it's also a great opportunity, right, to be able to build things and try new things. And it's really exciting.
And Anna, from your perspective, is obviously working at Zendesk, such a kind of household name in the SaaS world at this stage. How has that impacted hiring for you?
Yeah, I mean, I feel a little bit spoiled because it is something that, I'm coming from a place where people do know, and we have a good reputation in terms of our culture. And I experience that, and it's easy for me to sort of sell to our candidates. But, on that point, the candidates are the consumers. They have a lot of choices right now. And so if you go back to even just how do you put a job rec together? What are the things that you want to highlight? How do you get this in front of people so that they get the sound bites that you need them to have up front and, can get excited about talking to you? You're selling the whole time you're recruiting. I think we have a good product to sell, not just the product, but the culture and the place to work. So it makes it easy for me. Something that candidates have asked me recently, which I have not experienced before, but I love, and I think is a direct result of this last couple of years we've had, is, what do you find that gives you purpose at work? Mm-hmm. And so being able to identify, something around that, and, I'm here for more than a paycheck. There's a lot of places that we could all be. And why should you want to be here? That's something that requires some thought, and I think is a sea change in terms of how candidates are approaching positions.
Absolutely. And Zach, I know that's something you and I have spoken about before, the work you do in diversity and inclusion within Kraft Heinz, and how much that means to you, and the impact that makes, being a great example of that, maybe outside of the kind of the typical remit of a legal ops professional. Would you say that's important to you personally in kind of motivating you to come to work every day?
Yeah, I love Anna bringing that up because I think it's so true, right? We're going to have to work on contract management and e-billing, right? And those might not be the most exciting projects to work on, even though they are interesting. So I think finding those things that you are passionate about and finding a way to spin that into your role and the influence that you have is really crucial. So, diversity with outside counsel is a big thing right now. So trying to hold on to those projects that you really are interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, from your perspective, you obviously bought into the Coinbase culture and have recently joined yourself. What was it that resonated with you about what Coinbase is doing, and how is that impacting your plans in recruiting your team?
Yeah, I think as leaders of groups, you have to lean on your own personal story and your own personal experience because it's infectious. And you have to know it, you have to understand it, you have to understand your own drivers. So there's some self-awareness that's required there. And then there has to be some conviction because it is infectious when you recruit, when you develop talent across the team. So I really do look for that in myself. Like, why did I go to Facebook in the first place? Right? What drew me there? Is a very personal story. I teach a class at my alma mater around career pathing in the law, and we spend the first 2 classes understanding the framework to unpack that for yourself. What are the drivers? What are clients looking for? What are employers looking for? And making sure that there's a personal match for you there. And not that it has to be the same for everyone that you recruit or that you hire, but that you want to be able to kind of articulate that, or at least hear that from the other side in terms of a personal story. It doesn't always have to line up with the mission of the company, but maybe you just really, really like fast-paced, complex, thorny issues that you need to grapple with, and that drives you. And I love hearing that from people because even though they may not necessarily know a lot about crypto, I don't know a ton about crypto yet. And they may not necessarily know a lot about the things that we need to do in the legal department, but there are aspects of it that really drive them. Those are great candidates to consider. And I think that's a personal side of the equation. To Anna's point, like we have choice now. We are consumers in this business, and there's a lot of choice that I think employers are not giving potential candidates that they need to start because they're not going to be able to retain or recruit great talent.
100% actually, and presumably one of the things that is exciting at a kind of rapidly scaling business like Coinbase is that opportunity to kind of build the function, reimagine how the legal department is going to work. And it's something I was speaking to Mateo Sanchez, who leads legal operations at Outside and previously at Uber, about, was that kind of distinction in legal operations professionals between the kind of the builders, those people that are really comfortable in some degree of chaos and a fast-paced environment, and kind of building the systems and working alongside you to do that, as opposed to the people that maybe can come in and kind of manage the status quo really effectively. Have you kind of identified that pattern at all in different legal ops candidates or people you've worked with, that some people are better at the kind of build phase than the kind of maintenance or management phase?
Yeah, chaos has been a reality in the last 2 departments that I've worked in because it's the reality of the business for the organization. Comfort in that chaos. And I don't use that word chaos in a pejorative fashion. It's just the reality of the situation. Comfort in that. As I share with my students, like, one of my goals in my class is to make sure that they get comfortable feeling uncomfortable. That's a really important skill set. You can get a sense from that for candidates through certain aspects, but then you really see it play out when they're in the trenches. So I think it's a critical aspect. It's not the only aspect for hiring, but I think it's a critical one that helps you figure out how to allocate and how to kind of repurpose your team once you do have it set.
Absolutely. And Anna, one of the patterns I've identified over the last 9 months speaking with legal ops professionals on the podcast has been that the kind of route from paralegal into legal operations is one of the most common paths into the world of legal operations. And certainly here at Bright Flag, providing kind of career paths and career development opportunities is really important for our team. I'd be interested in what your experience has been working with paralegals, whether you've seen that transition work where they've maybe informally been kind of owning some legal ops role responsibilities anyway, and then maybe more formally transitioning into a legal ops role and career path, and what your experience of that has been, and that kind of collaboration between paralegal and legal ops.
Yeah, I don't know that I can speak really in depth to that kind of paralegal path. Certainly, I have an ex-paralegal on my team. It's certainly a way in, but I think to what we were talking about earlier, there are so many paths in. I came from, legal technology service. I have an ex-consultant on my team, which I think is becoming even more common. I'm seeing a lot of that in applicants. But yeah, I think this kind of like attorney adjacent, like wherever you fall in there, is like an easy way to kind of get your spark ignited around interest with legal ops and, start exploring it. I think if it's something folks are interested in, there are aspects of each of these roles that you can start picking up and saying, oh, this is actually something that, operations seems to cover. Get to know the core competencies through, ACC, through clock, through wherever, start understanding kind of where things plug in and play. And I think you can make a strong case for it. Another spot that I have, personally found success through, and I've seen other people go through, is I'm PMP certified. So finding a way in and a hook that's like a project management, which is very transferable across industries. So if you can kind of find your hook and a place that you're interested in, demonstrate some acumen and curiosity in that direction, I think there's multiple ways in, and certainly paralegals have seen success with that, which is awesome. And they're doing a ton to hold down the fort. And I think they should all come over to the ops side of things because it's just way cooler. So personal opinion.
I think you're so right, Anna. Like that adjacency, and you're coming with a level of kind of context and understanding of how a litigation team works, what the process might be, for instance. And if you can kind of supplement that with having that constant learning mindset, educating yourself around the core competencies of clock, or taking on a PMP qualification, as Jamie Ingles from Stripe said to me, she really sees the role of legal ops as, to some extent, a sequence of projects, potentially never-ending sequence of projects. So that skill set is so critical. I'd be interested, Zach, from your perspective, of how you've seen that kind of relationship between the paralegal role and the legal ops role play out.
Yeah, well, the paralegals are obviously oftentimes the subject matter experts with a lot of the projects that we're trying to lead. And so it's important to partner with them. But even more than the paralegals wanting to jump over to ops, I feel like since ops has become like the cool group within legal, we're even seeing, some of our more senior attorneys show interest in partnering on and spearheading some of these bigger ops projects that we have. And so that's been really exciting, getting that exposure for them as well.
Yeah, definitely the cool group, Zach. Couldn't agree more with that. And Akshay, from your perspective, have you any thoughts on the kind of transition from paralegal career path into legal operations?
First of all, I think there's nothing magical about legal operations. What we do is magical, but there's nothing magical about getting into legal operations. So I really value diversity of perspective and experience. I mean, there have been plenty of studies that have shown the business case for that, not simply from kind of categorical diversity, but just diversity of thought, diversity of perspective. So I value that. The team at Facebook had people who came from a law firm background. They had people who came from a nonprofit background, people who were in IP operations. So people who came from legal technology. So really kind of panoply of experience that kind of came together in legal operations. The same is true at Coinbase. So that's why I think that particular diversity really makes for a strong team effort. So I don't think, I look for any particular background or experience. For me, and I was a paralegal before I went to law school. So, I had that. I was a practicing lawyer for a while. I've done consulting. I've done business development. So I think each of those pieces of my background and experience add to where I am now. And I think that's equally true of a paralegal who wants to make the transition. I really like Anna's term, attorney adjacent. That's a good one. I'm going to use that. I love alliteration. So that's in my vocabulary.
With my blessing, actually, I go for it.
Absolutely. And one of the challenges, obviously, when, as you've all highlighted, you've got people coming from a variety of different backgrounds, bringing different strengths and competencies, and having the potential to succeed in a role. It can be pretty challenging, presumably, to kind of assess those different candidates when you are recruiting for the role. Many organizations incorporate an exercise or a presentation into their interview processes. It's certainly something we do here at Bright Flag pretty regularly, to drive some consistency in assessment of candidates. I'd be curious to understand whether any of you adopt a similar approach. Maybe I might turn that question over to you, first of all, Anna, in how you think about assessing candidates or testing them as part of the recruitment process.
Yeah, one of the things that it's interesting about this current climate is the speed at which decisions need to get made. As such, we haven't implemented any kind of formal, at least for operations, assessment progress. I have done that in past. I certainly look at things like grammar and sentence structure and communication ability and that kind of stuff as we speak or correspond. But as far as the hard skills, that's something that I really dig into in the interview questions. I also have very valued business partners who I think can represent, kind of, to Akshay's point, different perspectives and bringing a different kind of level of balance to the process, who are involved on panels. So we don't implement anything formal as far as like an assessment or a presentation or things like that. It might be something if it were, again, a more senior role or something that I had a very key deliverable in mind for what this person would be turning around. At this point, it's been a bit more general, a bit more junior, and just looking for that hunger, coachability, interest, and kind of the groundwork around the role that I'm trying to bring in.
It's so true, Anna. In the current climate, speed is key in the recruitment process. Candidates have multiple different options on the table, and getting that balance right between truly testing that the person's the right fit and moving at pace can be really challenging. And as you say, maybe it can depend on the seniority of the role, how extensive that process can be. Akshay, from your perspective, have you got a similar view on this to Anna in terms of the impact the current environment has on the sort of process you go through?
Yeah, well, I could share with you that, for the first time in my career, I had to do a presentation for my interview process at Coinbase. I don't know how unique that is across the industry, but as a candidate, I found that incredibly valuable. And now hiring on the other side at Coinbase, I'm going to find that incredibly valuable. I think one of the top skill sets in any role, but especially in this one, is the ability to effectively communicate succinctly, powerfully, to get your message across. I think it comes across incredibly well in a presentation style. So I think that adds a little bit to, we're going counter to this. It adds a little bit to the interview timeline, because you have to give the candidates enough time to prepare the presentation, whatever the prompt is. And then you got to make sure that people get on board with being on the panel for that presentation and then providing feedback. But I think it's critical. I know there's a lot of moving parts. I know there are lots of opportunities out there. And I'm not the most conservative person, but I say this with a hint of conservativeness. You want to make sure you're making the right hire, because the cost of making the wrong hire is significantly higher than taking a little bit longer to make the right hire.
Yeah, and that's certainly been my experience of kind of going through a process like asking candidate to deliver a presentation. Is it kind of tests mutual fit to some extent as well. It's an expensive mistake for the company, but also obviously for the individual if it isn't the right role for them, and the presentation can kind of crystallize what the key priorities are going to be, what the approach is going to be on both sides. So I really agree with you on that. The Bright Flag Legal Operators Compensation Survey that was released last week showed that most legal operations professionals receive a bonus. Certainly at Bright Flag, bonuses are tied to impact. Presumably that is the case for the majority of legal operations professionals. I'd be interested to understand how you go about measuring impact for legal operations roles. Zach, I'm not sure for your team whether that's part of the compensation package and how you think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think similar to a lot of companies, our bonus is tied to the company performance, and then there's also an individual performance piece to that. And so, to the example of driving diversity with our outside counsel, part of my bonus for this year is tied directly to formalizing a process for driving diversity within outside counsel. So, if I have 5 projects for the year, those are all going to factor into what my bonus payout is.
And it's great to have that kind of objective clarity and North Star to work towards. Anna, from your perspective at Zendesk, how do you think about kind of measuring impact for legal ops roles?
Yeah, it's a really good question and something that I'm continually reassessing. I think really easy to get sucked into kind of delivering on emotion versus like the actual impact and the needle that you're moving. We take a lot of time with our goal setting. We do OKRs at Zendesk. And so, presumably what we're picking as our goals are being chosen because of the level of impact that they have. That is what we're measuring folks against in terms of anything tied to bonuses, anything tied to any sort of comp, because it's really important to make sure that this is understood, clear, folks know what they're working for, we're all pointed in the right direction. And so, being lockstep on those OKRs is an important piece and only fair to your teams to do. That said, we're going to be checking in along the way. There will likely be course corrections. We do kind of do not quite moonshot, but stretch goals where we want to be reaching a little bit outside of our comfort zone. And there's not penalty for that. It needs to have a little bit of space. Otherwise, I think, why wouldn't you pick something that is achievable, but maybe isn't going to be as impactful as it could be if you had a bit more freedom and a bit more trust from folks that you're still going to do your best to get as far as you can. So tied to goals and a lot of thought around goals.
And I suppose that's the beauty of OKR, a well-written OKR, and it is measurable, specific, objective in assessing whether or not it has been achieved. And as you say, maybe takes the emotion out of those conversations or those decisions. And actually, as you scale the team at Coinbase, how are you thinking about measuring impact for the roles that you're hiring?
Yeah, we have a great OKR culture at Coinbase, as I am quickly learning. So I think that's a really good way for objective, measurable impact. And I think, that is the appropriate way. Now, I have no control over what the bonus policy is at Coinbase. That's set by the company. I don't know of any legal ops teams that get to set their own bonus policy. If you know of one, can you please let me know? I'd love to see what they've done. So you're generally driven by what the company has said in terms of bonus, but the discretion on any given team is with respect to the level of impact that you had, how to measure it. And I think OKRs are a great way of doing that, but they have to be measurable. They have to be specific, to your point, Alex, right? So understanding what those are, and then you have to have some stretch. There has to be some stretch to continue to push forward. If everyone in the company is always meeting their OKRs on a quarterly basis or annual basis or whatever your measurement timeline is, probably not pushing ourselves as hard as we need to. So I think whatever that philosophy is within the organization, I think you want to adopt that within the operations team as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We use OKRs across the entire business here at Bright Flag, and there has to be that kind of step change mentality, that it isn't just keeping the lights on, business as usual. You are pushing people to drive those kind of fundamental changes to move the business forward. We have a question here from the audience. Anna, I might direct this one to you if that's okay. The question is, I've been trying to transition from contract management into legal ops / paralegal roles, and I've been told that I don't have the relevant experience that is needed. Do you have any suggestions or tips regarding how to upskill for these kinds of roles online?
Sure. Well, I think that's going to be that feedback is maybe dependent on who you're talking to. I think there's a lot of places that would find contract management roles do jive with their philosophy around how they want to run ops. So don't be too discouraged would be one point. Lots of easy ways in from there, right? Like get to know the technology side. Not only are you executing on maybe some of the decisions around how contracts are flowing through, but what mechanisms are doing that, or the workflows. Project management, like I said, is something agnostic of any sort of specific skill that you can go and get a certification on. Certainly paralegal, there's a different kind of path of learning that you could embark on, a little bit longer piece and a little bit different kind of career path there. But technology from CM, workflows around CM, project management generally. I think you have a lot kind of going for you already. And if you can figure out a way to just dig in and maybe leverage that up and speak to it, and folks are going to be interested in that skill set because you've got a grounding in how the department runs. My team, for example, our bread and butter are contracts and our commercial engines. So like current SaaS companies and folks who are doing a lot of that work. So I think there's opportunity.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that skill set is in hot demand at the moment, and just finding the right fit organization, team, looking for the experience you have and that opportunity to grow. And I think it's probably a good segue to my next question, which I might direct to you, Akshay. How do you think about, and what are your secrets for developing your team?
No secrets. I don't think there's any really big secret here. I think understanding, so this part of this is me understanding and each of the team members understanding within themselves, what's the direction you want to take your career. Okay. And I think that requires self-awareness, some introspection and some thought. And then it's making sure that we're doing the things together, me and my direct reports and people on the team, to give them the right kind of experience to upskill towards that goal, whether it's within the group or elsewhere. And then, I think it's absolutely important as managers to have a very open and honest and transparent discussion. Like, if what you want is not here, what's the best way for us to get you there? Like, how can we have that conversation together? So within the construct of that development is experience. So work streams, projects that help you build towards that, feedback and coaching around things that went really well and recognizing those, and then being very direct and matter of fact about the areas of growth. I've had plenty of those in my career. I wouldn't be where I am without those. I think managers aren't great about having those conversations and being intentional around them and giving very specific, actionable feedback. But realizing that if you don't do that as a manager, you're actually doing a disservice to your team.
I couldn't agree more. Creating a culture where giving objective, transparent feedback and understanding that is constructive and it is how an individual can develop, I think is critical. And managers who shy away from that are probably doing a disservice to the people that they're managing, and may ultimately see them disengaging if they find that the work isn't challenging them or giving them that headroom. Zach, from your perspective, how do you think about developing your team?
Yeah, I think Akshay had a really good point, that trying to understand what makes everyone tick and then trying to align the work that's going to make them excited to be on the team is really important. And when that isn't possible, trying to help them find opportunities and stretch experiences that might help them stay engaged, even if it isn't on your team. Because to Akshay's point, keeping them on the team when they're not fully engaged is not just a disservice to them, but also to your team.
Absolutely. And Anna, would you kind of share Akshay and Zach's view, or anything to add from your perspective?
Yeah, I agree with what both Akshay and Zach said. I think, we're going through some leadership sprints currently, and a message that I'm getting loud and clear is there's no kind of mutual exclusivity between accountability and safety. And so being able to walk that line and make sure that your team members have, the safety to express what they need and want, whether that's with you or with the company or anywhere. And also the accountability around, we are driving toward some greater mission than maybe this initial project appears to you, and being able to tie that to a longer tail string of results, walking that line, getting people engaged, and it requires, I think, a lot of thought and hands-on management from leadership, is something that's really important. And I think an area that I'm excited personally to continue to grow in. I think that's an unlimited growth potential space is skilling up in management. So yeah, but agree.
Absolutely. And As we discussed at the beginning of the session, we're obviously in a very hot market. And from my experience, building a great culture, people learning about that, understanding that this is a place where they're going to develop and learn, have fun along the way, have that opportunity to progress, that has a compounding effect in kind of bringing on board the next person or the next member of the team. I'd be interested, actually, in your perspective in such a hot market. How do you ensure that a candidate's decision just doesn't come down to compensation? And how do you think about that?
Oh, man. I think, if you have conviction as a hiring manager and as a team about the journey that you're on, it's not going to be the same for every candidate. It's not going to resonate with everyone, but chances are you will find someone that it will resonate with. And I think it's somewhat irresponsible for me to think that compensation isn't important. But to your point, will it come down to that? All things being equal, which they aren't always. So this is a bit of an irrelevant example, but it can happen. All things being equal, of course, they're going to take the one with more compensation. So what we can control on the hiring side is the journey that we're on. And do you want to be on that journey with us? Being able to articulate that with conviction, I think, is a critical component of finding the right candidate. And not all companies are for everyone. Not all cultures are for everyone. Not all dynamics are for everyone. To Zach's earlier point, like, not everyone wants to work in a very high-paced, crazy, chaotic atmosphere. Even if we may pay the best, like, who knows? Like, that's not something that's going to resonate with everybody. And so I think making sure that you are very clear about the expectations around that, and then delivering that message to the candidates should set you apart from the others that they're considering, provided that it resonates with who they are and what they want.
I think that's great advice, actually. And there's some fantastic questions coming in here in the chat. Anna, I might direct this one to you, if that's okay. If there was one barrier to success that you could make go away today, what would that be and why?
I suppose I should gear this around hiring and team stuff, not just generally. I think that there has been a long kind of systemic issue with getting diverse candidates and perspective in the right spaces. And it's something that we have been working really hard with our recruiting partners to make changes with. I think there's a long way to go. I think our team is doing a good job. Are we doing a great job? I don't think so. I think that we know that there's a lot of room to grow there. I see a lot of sort of change happening, but very slowly. And if there is a way to expedite, this kind of next kind of generation of thought coming in, I think that would be my ideal scenario. Basically, like, burn everything down and create something new and bring in like a lot of new thoughts, new perspectives, people with different ideas, and no more of this. We've done it this way because we've always done it.
100%. One of our core values here at Bright Flag is embrace authenticity, and that diversity of backgrounds and perspectives is really a business strength. And I think, as you say, it's breaking down those barriers and accelerating that rate of change in ensuring those candidates are coming through processes, getting those opportunities. Another question that came in. I work at a company that would benefit greatly from building a legal ops team. They currently run a very lean attorneys only team. What recommendations do you have to prove the value add for my organization of a legal ops role? Actually, I might direct that question to you, if that's okay.
Great question. I think it's a fantastic question. Well, hopefully that won't be a relevant question for too much longer as companies kind of adopt the necessity for this role. But I would look at some opportunities for you to demonstrate value from an operations perspective. And you can do it in a few different ways. If there are, and I'll pick three. There are probably things that the attorneys are doing from a very manual perspective. It's taking up their time. It's taking them away from their core strategic work. Can you help them offload that through better process, through segmentation, through some level of automation with a tool. You will make a lot of friends by doing that. Number 2, cost. I'm sure you spend money on outside providers, whether they are law firms or not. Figuring out better pricing mechanisms, alternative fee arrangements, better discounts, better cost control. You'll make friends with the lawyers as well as with the finance department. And then the third one is like kind of, I hate to use the terms go off the rails a little bit, but do something that you think could provide a lot of value outside of those 2 spheres. Just kind of own that. Ownership is a big piece of the culture at Coinbase. Like, be an owner is one of our tenets. And I think that goes a long way towards demonstrating value for any given function. So if there's a problem within the department that you can identify, or I see this a lot, the business is having issues with the legal department that with a little bit of process and some paperwork and maybe a little bit of a few forms here or there, or a little bit of tooling could really improve the relationship. I think those go a long way towards demonstrating the value from an operational perspective.
Absolutely. And I think, as you said, hopefully this isn't a problem that we see persist for too much longer in the industry. The role is just becoming much more widespread and well understood. But I still encounter those organizations where the legal leadership can't get out of their own way, and they have a long shopping list of projects and initiatives that they know would have an impact, but they simply don't have the bandwidth or the skill set to execute on them. And it's not just lawyer efficiency, it's better cost control, it's a better relationship with finance, or indeed outside counsel that can be the really significant step change improvements that legal ops can deliver and that the role can deliver. Another question here, Zach, that I might direct to you. I've been hired as the first legal ops specialist at my company with 15,000 employees worldwide. How can I prove myself so I can have my own legal ops team in the future?
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is a very similar answer to what Akshay just gave, right? Start working on things and showing the value in dollars, not just to the finance team, but to the legal leadership team, and prove yourself to the attorneys, right? Take over, as Akshay mentioned, processes where you can offload some more administrative burdens from the attorneys and kind of streamline those. And I think everyone will see the value pretty quickly.
If you want a good soundbite on that, I think I saw Mario Carroll post something the other day about how legal ops is a force multiplier. And I think that is absolutely true. You're going to increase the group's effectiveness tenfold by putting some kind of oversight and processes in place, as Zach and Akshay mentioned.
I think that's so true, Anna. And I think when you're kind of first hired into the role, I think if you can get some wins under your belt, you can demonstrate the value and the return that your initiatives have delivered. I think it can make it much easier to get headcount approved, get buy-in for subsequent initiatives as well. And we're running short on time, and I want to close by asking each of you a question about your own career journeys. And Anna, I might ask you first. How has your own professional mindset changed in the last 2 years through the course of the pandemic? And what's become more important to you and what's become less important?
I think I'm following the same path as our candidates. I think, and I think Akshay was the one who brought this up earlier, but, a big differentiator for me in my career has been, the comfort with discomfort. That's always where I've found opportunities. It's always where I've been, challenged to excel. It's always where I've surprised myself. So figuring out how to almost embrace and seek out discomfort and, lean in at this point, because you're not going to escape it, is crucial, and something that I think is something that I want to continue to grow and look for in teammates. And then the other thing is the question I was asked, which is like, why am I here? What's my purpose? We have choices. We all have choices. Do I want to go get a tiny house in Utah and just be completely off the grid? Do I want to continue to work at Zendesk and build the team? And if so, why for each of those? So I think being able to identify something meaningful outside of, what might be the day-to-day tasks has just highlighted itself, as we don't have the escapes that we might have had when it was just sort of normal world, pre-pandemic world.
Absolutely. And actually, I might ask the same question of you. How has your own professional mindset changed in the last 2 years?
The This might be a little counterintuitive, but self-care has become a much bigger part of my life, having the ability to work from home. And it has paid dividends for me as a manager, for me as an individual contributor on our teams. I've been able to be more strategic in my thinking through things like meditation. My wife makes fun of me all the time. Like, I do crazy stuff. Like, there are times I don't eat for 2 days. I do cold therapy on a daily basis. I've always exercised regularly, but these additional things that I've added into my life because I have the brain space and the time space to do that, because I'm not commuting to an office, has paid huge dividends for me as a professional. So I think, if anything, that the last 2 years have either reminded us or taught us, hopefully reminded us, but not taught us, is that it is a business case. Self-care is a business case for yourself as a business person and as a professional. And the more attention that you pay to that, the better you're going to be for your teams and your organization.
I couldn't agree more, actually. And I think the pandemic obviously enabled on one hand much greater work-life balance and flexibility for people to work hybrid, work remote. There is the opportunity to work longer hours and be always available. And I think having that mindset as a leader, that you encourage your team to put their physical and mental health and well-being first and maintain a great work-life balance, I think is critical for retaining and developing talent. And I think I certainly agree with you. You see the benefits of that in the quality of people's work and their creativity and their ability to execute when they aren't burnt out or getting close to being burnt out. Zach, I might ask you the same question. How has your mindset changed over the last 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, I love Akshay's point about self-care. I was thinking about it in the way that we used to kind of build our lives to fit with our job. And I think we've kind of flipped that on the head. And, you know, we're in a position where we have this flexibility and we can pick and choose what sort of career paths we can fit around what's important to us in our lives. And, you know, one thing that I've noticed over the past couple of years is the most important thing to me every day is my long walk in the morning with my dogs in the sun. And, you know, the thought of how many days a week am I willing to give that up, where I have some of my, you know, most clear moments. And, you know, even sometimes some of my most clear thoughts about work during that walk. How many days a week am I willing to give that up to commute into an office? And I'll give you a hint, it's not very many.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think one of the things I got back was bath time with our young daughters, and not being on a plane constantly and traveling an awful lot has given me a lot more of those days. And I share that sentiment. There are more important things in life as well, and I think when you are fulfilled, when you're getting those experiences like the walk with your dog every morning, I think it does enable you to do better work as well. This has been a fantastic conversation, Colin. I know we've only got a few minutes left, so I want to hand it over for any other questions from the audience before we finish up.
It's coming through. So if there's any questions, guys, please type them in the chat box. I have a couple for the panel. So first, we talked about. We've heard for the past 2 years about legal ops teams now having leverage, right? When getting hired. What is that leverage to the employees, and what should they be asking for? That, Akshay, you want to take that one?
As a candidate, what should I be asking for?
Yeah.
Besides more money?
Besides more money, like, you know, we hear like, you know, the top line is like, hey, now you have all this leverage.
Yeah.
But what is the leverage to get? What?
Yeah, I don't think it's I don't think it's necessarily unique to legal operations candidates, but I really like how Zach articulated it. We flipped the script. That's so true. We fit our jobs around our lives. As painful as it was early in the pandemic to go remote, as someone who worked in an office and you could have that coffee conversation or that water cooler conversation on a daily basis, it actually helped me organize the rest of my life to make me a better professional. And I think that's incredible leverage out there in the candidate and employee ecosystem right now. So I would not compromise on that. And you know, everyone's individual situation is different with respect to finances and family situations and all that. And I fully appreciate that. But to me, that's the greatest leverage that we have right now as candidates and employees, and we should use it to our full advantage.
Is there a world where we're all back in the office like 9 to 5? Is that happening ever again?
I don't think so.
Good.
I think if you talk
Good.
to anyone out there, whether it's JLL, who does so much office leasing, or any other, like, it's just not going to happen because we have that choice. People are moving. They're leaving states and moving to Utah or wherever else, leaving California, leaving New York, leaving Texas. They're going where they want to go because they have the ability to work from there. And that's a powerful thing from my perspective.
So I have another question. I'd be remiss if I don't bring it up. So we had some findings from the Brightflag Legal Operators Compensation Survey. And in that compensation survey, we found that 68% from 250 people who took the survey are women. But yes, only earn 78 cents on the dollar. What are you and your teams doing when you're hiring someone to rectify that? Or is there any thought process in place?
I can take a stab at some answer here. So I don't know that there's a focus on kind of that gender pay gap specifically, at least not that's come into the legal sector. But what I have seen is because of the demands of candidates and because of the type of choices that are out there, and in order to be competitive out in the world, we've had to reassess not only how we're, grading different levels for pay for new folks coming on, but how we are going to, re-level internally around that. We've been using I won't name a name, but a certain survey that I don't think does legal very well. It's very kind of like respected and widely used pay grade survey. And we are working actively with our comp and talent acquisition teams to redo that with perspective that's much more attuned to what the market is actually delivering for legal departments. So with that, of course, trying to keep in mind, and I am obviously very vested in this, women's pay and pay for folks of diverse backgrounds and all of that good stuff. But generally everybody is kind of working to level up because that's what the market right now is demanding. And you should not be penalized for not, jumping ship and getting a new job in order to capitalize on that.
Anything to add to that, Zach or Akshay?
Hopefully your company has an eye towards this at their leveling. I think that was one of the things that I was impressed with at Coinbase, how they think about compensation and how it applies across the board. Now, if the reality of that is not matching up with the goals that they've set, that's probably a systemic issue that needs to be addressed. But I think having awareness about it as a hiring manager is a key component, because as a hiring manager, the person that you're hiring, the level they're coming in at, and the compensation that they'll be receiving. Making sure that's on par with what the market is telling you, regardless of gender or diversity, is a critical component. So I think just being aware of that issue as a hiring manager is a really strong starting point.
So this is kind of systemic, right? How we even ended up at this point in this day and age, 2022. I've seen all the reputable surveys, right? For years. This is just another survey echoing the same thing. This is all related to hiring, right? So it's would you say when, what would your tips be for, women negotiating? Do you think that could be an issue? Is it an internal issue in companies, putting a higher price tag, on men versus women? Because this is something that should be solved, right? Equitably. Sounds like you're agreeing with me. I see body language.
Big question.
I think we're going to need an entire webinar on that issue, to be honest. There's a lot to unpack.
It's something that really irked me when I seen it.
Absolutely.
It's not equitable. We're probably not going to solve it in the next 3 minutes, but I did want to put it out there and get some thoughts on it.
Listen, I think it's something legal operators should be unpacking further. Is there programming that we can offer up to the industry to understand how to be better at it?
100% agree. Alex, Kelly, I'm handing it back to you for the last word.
Thanks, Colin. I just wanted to thank our panelists for joining us for a really lively and I think informative conversation today about all things legal operations, team building, compensation. in this incredibly hot market. I've certainly learned a lot from the conversation. I hope the audience has as well. So a massive thank you to Zach, Anna, and Akshay for sharing their expertise and insights with us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Bright Flag. Thank you, attendees.
Take care.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.